Hello, my name is Tavisan and I'm currently pursuing a master's degree in architecture at the Virginia Tech's Washington Alexandria Architecture Center. It is spring of 2021 and through this podcast I'm delighted to present my paper for the Architecture and Urbanism seminar course. Let me give you a brief introduction to what I will be talking about. We are looking at architectural history here. It is believed that the work of neoclassical masters had influenced the work of modern architects a century later. I will be talking about Etienne Louis Boullee's ideas on architecture parlante, which translates to speaking architecture, and its influences on design of public buildings. During the time when Boullee wrote his treatise on architecture, France was seeing a major shift in its political system. The country was looking to give a new meaning to public buildings, something more welcoming and also to stand as a symbol for unity and freedom. Boullee's designs for public buildings had three major characteristics. They were expressive in terms of scale, metaphorical, with giving hints about the use or function of the building from the exterior, and symbolic, where a space inside had the characteristics and function of a temple to help remember the past glory, or sometimes the responsibilities bestowed upon the people working in the building. The three characteristics have truly redefined the power of architecture and have made our interaction with the built environment more personal. With this in mind, I will be transporting you to India. The Indian Subcontinent, it is rightly called, was under the colonial rule for more than 300 years. The country, after independence and partition, had a newly elected democratic government. In the mid-20th century, the country had seen a number of commissions for public buildings given to eminent architects during that time. Using Boullee's ideas of architecture as a lens, I will be talking about the characteristics of public buildings in India during post-independence years. We will be focusing on and drawing comparisons to Le Corbusier's designs. Through this, we will have the opportunity to measure the reach of Boullee's ideas in the East. The period between 1789 to 1799, France had witnessed a change in the political landscape. Even though King Louis XVI brought about some reform by bringing in constitutional monarchy, the commoners felt the power was still vested with the clergy and the aristocrats. The revolution did give rise to a lot of bloodshed. The King Louis XVI was guillotined, and it did end with the setting up of a bicameral legislature. The people of France themselves were able to bring about this tremendous change, which did quite effectively send a message to the other parts of the world. India, a country known for its much-celebrated cultural diversity, was under the British rule for more than 300 years. Even though the British brought about a lot of development, the country was exploited for its natural resources and labor. Power and privilege were vested with the British, and the commoners felt devoid of adequate representation and rights. Similar to what happened in France, the taxation policy brought about by the British also did fuel the freedom movement. Though the British tried to follow the strategy of divide and rule, which led to communal riots, the people established a united front to fight back. The country gained its independence in the year 1947, and its constitution came into effect in the year 1950. We can draw parallels to the change in political atmosphere witnessed by both the countries. During the time of absolute monarchy, the power vested entirely with the royal family. The caste which people belonged to decided their living standards, opportunities, and even rights. When India got its civilian lawmakers, the country was left with a number of palaces which were the residences and courts of kings, and some of it taken over and used by the colonial rulers. Even though the architecture of the past reminds us of the unpleasant events which took place, they are symbolic to our roots, culture, and tradition, and act as a form of identity. With the new bicameral legislature, the country was looking to give a new meaning to the architecture of public buildings, commissioned henceforth to be symbolic, representative of change and to portray the value of the new republic. Etienne Louis Boullee was a Parisian architect, writer, and an artist. He had worked on a few small-scale commissions during the reign of King Louis XV, and his drawings for public spaces, though unbuilt, had gained much popularity during the Revolution and whose ideas have influenced a number of modern architects a century later. He was born in Paris on 12th February 1728 and died there on 6th February 1799. He started out as a teacher at the École des Ponts at a very young age. Even though he worked on his treatise, Architecture Essay on Art, before the Revolution, it was only published in the Napoleonic era after his death. Boullee believed that architecture had an art and a science portion to it, and according to him, the art portion of architecture was still at a very primitive stage and never evolved. As architects, we are never given enough time or the opportunity to really develop or conceive, as Boullee would call it, the design for a building. Let us now see how he brought about character into his buildings. He writes in his essay, "The immediate impression made on us by the sight of an architectural monument is the result of its general plan. What we feel constitutes its character, and what I call giving a building character, is the art of using in any design all the means appropriate and relevant to the subject, so that the onlooker experiences only those feelings that the subject should arouse, which are essential to it and to which it is susceptible." According to Boullee, buildings' form must adhere to symmetry, regularity, and variety. These three qualities are closest to a human organism, and hence we find it beautiful and appealing. Amongst geometric shapes, the sphere has all the three qualities and hence closest to nature. These analogies were put forth by Boullee to disagree with Claude Perrault, the architect who designed the east facade of the Louvre in Paris, his argument being architecture is a fantastic art and pure invention. Nature has different faces. For instance, when we look at seasons, summers are bright, which is a symbol of grandeur. Autumn has variety and smiling faces, which can translate to a variety in volumes. And winter has a gloomy and sad character to it, which we relate to tombs or the architecture of death. In this way, Boullee tries to bring character to his buildings and proves the direct connection between architecture and nature. Let us now look at Boullee's drawings for the Palace of Justice. A perspective view is displayed on screen. From this drawing, you can see the relationship between the building and the sky brought about by the artist in Boullee. He has managed to bring a sense of majesty and grandeur in this simple form with just the scale and volume. The huge mass on top is where the courts are present, and as you can see, the bottom portion, which looks buried, will have the prisons. The massive volume on top makes it appear closer to the skies, giving weight to the sanctity of life, and space below this portrays, in Boullee's words, the tomb of the criminals. This arrangement brings about the metaphorical image of vice overwhelmed by the weight of justice. The shape of the building appears to be cuboidal and devoid of any ornamentation. The monotony in the facade is broken by the columnar screens on all sides. The building conveys the expressive and dominant nature through its massive form. The upper level, even though it gives an idea of a square, has spaces arranged in the form of a Greek cross. The main Parliament court occupies the center with a chapel, chambers, excise, and audit offices occupying the four arms. There are courtyards on the four corners to bring in light into the space. The gallery on all four sides on the periphery, whose walls are the ones we can see from the exterior. With this arrangement, you can observe that people are welcome to enter from all sides and witness the power of justice. The Parliament Court at the center, according to the plan which is now displayed on screen, does seem to have a dome above it. You would have noticed from the previous image that this dome is not visible from the exterior. The metaphorical idea of the dome taking after the shape of the sky and in a way connecting the space to the cosmos can be seen in a lot of Boulet's drawings. In this building, the connection points to the importance of the function which happens in that particular space, and the responsibility vested in the people using the space is highlighted. The idea of having a chapel inside the building is to remind us the glory of the past. Boullee has conveyed the symbolic nature of the building with the chapel, idea of the dome above the court, and the honorific columnar screen visible on the exterior. The goal of the symbolic space, explains Richard A. Etienne in his book Symbolic Space, is to achieve a special character that would seem to correspond experimentally to a deeply held inner sense of cherished religious, social, or political idea, thus effectively fit into the context. The courtyards on the four sides, which in addition to bringing in light into the building, effectively serves as a transition space between the gallery and the courthouse and also spaces within the courthouse. Richard Etienne comments, Boulet's project for the Ministry of Justice presents that allegory of virtue triumphing over vice, with the courthouse placed on top of the prison, whose low rusticated form appears to be sinking into the ground, a metaphor suggesting that incarceration is tantamount to premature death. Boullee, through his drawing for the Palace of Justice, did relate architecture to nature. Looking back at my brief introduction to his architectural theory, we will be able to relate to the characteristics of the human organism. There is symmetry in both the plan and elevation, variety shown through the different volumes, and regularity through repetition in the colonnade. By now, we have tried to relate the political events to the architecture of the time. Let us now make sure we ask the right questions in order to better understand this connection. From Anthony Widler's comments in his article titled Researching Revolution, we can learn that it is not appropriate to call Boulle's designs revolutionary, but the right argument to put forward will be, to what extent did their work after 1789 register the influence of revolutionary events? We should be clear that Boullee produced these drawings before the revolution, and the development of revolutionary ideas in the minds of the people and the volatile political landscape attracted much appreciation for his designs. Let us now look at another one of Boulle's projects which he designed for the revolutionary government, called the Palais National. Boullee believed that the importance of this building must be shown through the most expressive image of art. In this regard, he wanted the building to celebrate law which is loved and desired by the people. The drawing you see on the screen is of the front elevation. There are two rows of figures holding decrees on either sides of the grand entrance, placed on stylo baits at the base of the building. A little above this, we can notice the tables of law inscribed on the facade, and further up, you can see a well-decorated entablature marking the end of the wider section of the wall. A part of the wall continues above this, which Boullee calls the attic, as bas relief containing inscriptions of festivals. There is an element resembling a crown above this attic, through which Boullee wanted to portray the greatest victory the country has earned, which is freedom. Looking at the building next to the palace in the drawing, we can see the grandeur brought about by simple geometric form through its massive scale. The grand arched entrance at the center is almost the size of the building next door. It looks like Boullee has really worked on the expressive character here. The metaphorical character is pointed out by Richard Etienne in his book The Symbolic Space, where he says, Boulle's proposed Palais National presented a blank facade inscribed with the Constitution after the manner of the biblical tablets brought down from Mount Sinai by Moses. We do not have much information about the distribution of spaces within the building, but let us try and decode using the section drawing which you can see on the screen. This is a section through the Parliament House. On the far left, you can identify the attic which we had spotted on the elevation. Taking cues from what we have learned till now, we can say that the Palais National had a square plan. The Parliament House occupied the large central space with stepped seating and a large dome above. The significance of this space is explained through its large volume and centrality. There are smaller chambers with hallways on either sides around the Parliament House. These chambers also have a dome above, but comparatively a smaller one. The central dome, as we can observe on this section, is decorated with square niches, have a quality of the space of consecration to the idea of the institution. And finally, there are multi-storied galleries which extend all around on the periphery with a hip roof. In the Parliament House, you can see a series of standalone columns circling the corridor which are for the ceremonial aspect rather than structural. The massive dome, on the other hand, will appear to magically float with the eyes of the occupants as the dome does not rest on the columns but the walls behind them. These two contribute to the subliminal aspect of the design, which I am hoping we could talk about on the next episode. Now, going back to our topic, this kind of architectural language and style, termed neoclassical, gained much fanfare during the French Revolution, the time when Paris was looking to rebuild its city, giving a new meaning to the buildings. I'm sure you would have observed the classical elements in Boullee's projects. The Ionic columns and the pediment are present in most of Boullee's drawings, but they do not denote the beginning or the end of a floor level like the architectural styles of Renaissance and Baroque which preceded the neoclassical style. This style can be traced back to the Church of Saint Genevieve designed by Jacques Germain Soufflot before the Revolution. From what we have discussed till now, it is evident that Boullee's ideas on architecture parlante, or speaking architecture, does give a new meaning to public buildings. Let us now analyze how far these ideas have influenced the design of public buildings a century later. Let us now look at the public monuments as Boullee would call them for its symbolic nature, commissioned post-independence time in the Republic of India. Le Corbusier, though a European, was called to design public buildings and also the city of Chandigarh in India by the Jawaharlal Nehru government. Yes, how ironic. Let us briefly think about the political atmosphere. On one hand, India wanted a new identity after thousands of years of feudalism and absolute monarchy. People had their fundamental rights and adequate representation in the parliament to make sure their voices were heard. The other motive being, India wanted to send a message to the world that they were also an emerging global power and an active participant in the modernism movement. Le Corbusier was pretty well known in the West for his revolutionary character in designs and architectural theory. Maybe this is the reason why he was invited, and I would like to take this opportunity to look at his work in India and analyze how far Boullee's theories might have influenced his designs. Let us take the focus off the neoclassical style and try to spot Boullee's ideas on architecture parlante in Corbusier's work. The Jawaharlal Nehru government had approached Le Corbusier and invited him to be the architectural advisor for the design of the capital city of Chandigarh. Let us look more into the political landscape to help understand the situation better. In 1950, India formed its new constitution with Nehru as the Prime Minister. In the same time period, India had to face another tough situation, which was the partition resulting in the formation of Pakistan. The western part of Punjab was annexed to this new nation, and the city of Chandigarh was planned to act as the capital city for the region of Punjab within the Indian territory. The Nehru government wanted the new city to be symbolic of freedom, unfettered by the traditions of the past, an expression of nation's faith in the future. The picture you see on screen is of Chandigarh's assembly building designed by Corbusier. When he had given his design for the assembly building, the state of Punjab had a bicameral legislature where there was a legislative assembly, which is the lower house, and a legislative council, the upper house. The lower house had more power and the members were directly elected by the people. Now, looking at the building, the hyperboloid structure you see, which is visible from the exterior, underneath it is where the lower house is located. It does say a lot of its significance. We can say that this hyperboloid is true to its appearance as it is not just present on the roof but extends down to the floor of the lower house. This shape is believed to have been inspired from the cooling towers of the Sabarmati power plants in Ahmedabad during Le Corbusier's tours. In addition, this shape also echoes Nehru's advocacy for technological development. Around the Legislative Assembly is a double high lobby with a forest of circular columns. The skylight above makes the user look upwards and thereby interpret the height and the repetitive nature, making it feel like a space of consecration. These add to the symbolic character of this monument. It is evident from the exterior that the building had a rectangular plan. Corbusier had used the Brissole system of sunshades, which looks like a neck grate on the north, east, and west facades. The south side had a portico with a triple high curved canopy roof above, supported by 7 walls which divided the floor into bays. There is a 25 feet square entry door at the same side with artwork on it representing the path of the sun and the folklore. Le Corbusier had brought in the expressive character or the grandeur in the simple cuboidal form through its scale. Corbusier had been fascinated with the Mughal palaces which had a monumental portico at the entrance with a well-manicured garden which used to signify the powerhouse where laws were passed. The portico in the assembly building is believed to have been inspired from them. Quatremere frequency would classify this under the idea of type. The use of the monumental portico as a type to denote the function of the building can be considered the metaphorical character here. Let us now look at another one of Le Corbusier's commissions in India, the Mill Owners Association in Ahmedabad. The state of Gujarat was known for its textile mills and was candidly called the Manchester of India. The Mill Owners Association provided an institutional framework for the close family ties that existed among the city's largest chain textile mill owners. The building had a simple form and its rectangular plan is evident from the first look. The building had 3 stories. The first level had the lobby, the level above had the office spaces and the conference room, and the topmost level had the assembly space. The front and the rear side of the building had no exterior walls. There is a concrete grid-like structure with planters which look like an oversized Brissole system with a floating garden at each level. This enables unobstructed view of the garden to the front and the Sabarmati River to the rear of the building. There is a wide ramp which directly connects to the second level and a staircase right beside it on the front side. The absence of exterior walls on the front and the rear facade can translate to the transparency which needed to exist due to the control the mills had on the economy during the time. Corbusier would have wanted the building to inspire the user. This may be the metaphorical character the architect would have wanted to convey. The building with its exposed concrete finish, the massive concrete jali, and the grand ramp entryway does contribute in some way to the grandeur and expressive character. The assembly space on the topmost floor is enclosed by curved walls like a womb. From the building section, which is displayed on screen right now, we can see that this space has a concave concrete slab as the roof, which lets in light through the curved ends. The architect has given a lot of emphasis to this space, which will host discussions with all the mill owners. The importance shown towards the function brings out the symbolic character. From the projects we have looked at, we can say that though Le Corbusier's designs followed the modernist architectural style, they do intend to have the characteristics of the architecture parlante. Both the buildings have regularity and symmetry to some extent, which are the characteristics of the human organisms, and by Boullee's theory is the reason why we might find it appealing. From what we have seen, Boullee has given much importance to the plan, describing it as the source of the impression the building makes on us. Le Corbusier, too, in his treatise Towards a New Architecture, writes, "The plan is the generator," and further compares it to a plan of a battle where he says, "The battle is composed of masses in space, and the morale of the army is the cluster of predetermined ideas and the driving purpose." Would you say that both these projects stand true to the theory? There is another aspect we have missed about Le Corbusier's designs, which is the juxtaposition of contrasting elements. For instance, the hyperboloid roof above the assembly building is in contrast to the cuboidal overall form, and the Mill Owners Association had a grand ramp and a staircase next to each other on the front facade. Corbusier has magically brought about the harmony in the overall composition in both these projects. Through the study, we can measure the reach of Boullee's ideas on architecture parlante and how it has helped shape the architecture of public buildings. Though the international style has made all the cities look the same, we can use Boullee's ideas on architecture to add some character to public buildings, thereby strengthening its ties to the cultural landscape where they are built. Corbusier believed that we should focus on the laws of mass, rhythm, and proportion in design, as architectural styles are no longer of interest in the age of machines. In that sense, he writes that there has been a revolution in the conception of what architecture is. As I had mentioned earlier, even though the historic buildings remind us of the unpleasant events of the past, we should remember that they stand as symbols of our cultural identity and ties to a particular place. Anthony Whittler, in his article titled Researching Revolution, writes, "It was a paradox noted by many observers of the revolution that the cultural vandalism of its early, supported tacitly or openly by the successive governments, was accompanied by an emerging sensibility towards a national patrimony embodied in historical and artistic monuments." We can look at examples from both the scenarios we talked about. The Palais du Louvre in Paris, which is now a museum, was originally built as a royal residence in the 16th century. The very site preceded a fortress constructed by King Philippe Augustus in the year 1190. The site would have stood as a symbol for 800 years of monarchy during the Revolution, but yet the revolutionary government decided to make it into a museum which can talk about the greatness of France to the world. The museum currently holds a number of art and artifacts which represent thousands of years of human civilization. Likewise, the Viceroy's house in New Delhi was designed by the British architect Sir Edwin Lutyens. Before independence is now the Rashtrapati Bhavan, which translates to the President's house. Even though this massive 350-room courtyard was initially built for the Viceroy of India, it now stands as a symbol of the new republic with the president residing there, and parts of the complex which include the museum, portions of the main building, and the gardens open to public. Their official website on the welcome page says, "From being a symbol of imperial domination and power, it is today emblematic of Indian democracy and its secular, plural, and inclusive traditions." These two examples do sum up Whittler's comment. Though there has been much criticism to the functional aspect of Le Corbusier's design of public buildings in India, he should be applauded for the sensitivity towards architecture, taking into consideration the people, culture, and changing political landscape. Architecture is definitely not pure invention.